So we'll address the topic of how to be in tune and how to be an inspiring teacher. And David G. and I will both speak a little bit, and then we'll leave time for questions and answers. And we'll try to finish by 7:30, and then we'll see what happens.
Bless everyone.
Bless everyone. Okay, how to be in tune and be an inspiring teacher. Master said that the highest prayer was, Lord, give me thyself, that I may give thee to all. And so there are two aspects to this. Give me thyself, and then that I may be a channel to give thee to all. A few months ago, I was struggling with distractions in meditation. Yes, even people who've been meditating a long time still struggle with this problem of distractions. And so the thought came to me in meditation to somewhat divide the way that I'm trying to work with Master to live my life into two categories, moksha and seva. So that when I'm in the meditation room, when I'm privately praying, when I'm doing my own sadhana, the purpose of doing that is moksha. And the reason I did that, divided it that way in meditation, is that intruding into my thoughts in meditation were the seva that I do. Thoughts of the schedule that I have, the classes that I might have, or the activities, or I was going to see this person or do that activity. And that kept intruding in my mind, and I said, no, I should not be thinking of that while I'm meditating. That has to do with the second part of Master's prayer, that I may give thee to all. We do have to do seva. It's part of our spiritual path. It's the part of spiritual path for anyone. Even a person who is only meditating must have the attitude of also doing seva at the time that they're meditating, or that their meditation is a part of their seva. Okay, so let me come to the question of moksha, because that is where we will truly be in tune. Attunement comes first from the inside, from the depths of our own connection with God. Master said that when we worship someone or worship something, the question of worship is the desire to become one with that which we worship. That's the meaning of worship. So when we worship God, it is because we desire to become one with God. Devotion is the love of the heart that is directed upward to either God, to an aspect of God, or to a pure channel of God. So we can direct devotion to Master. We could direct our devotion to the light that we see in meditation. We could direct our devotion to whatever form of God we imagine. See, any form that we imagine, anything that we can imagine, is always a limitation. But even the attempt to imagine that will bring us in tune, because God is what we imagine. He just is many other things also. So, but to try to visualize Master, to try to feel His presence, to try to visualize God as light, or God as Vishnu, or God as Krishna, anything that we try to visualize, it awakens and directs the energy of the heart in devotion, and it focuses the mind. But so there are two aspects to being a teacher. The first is your own very sincere attempt at your own sadhana, private sadhana. Without that grounding, without that daily practice of your own deep attempt to realize God, you'll have some to give. Think of the ego as being like a cup. And a person who is intelligent, a person who is learned, a person who is sincere in their desire to help other people, that ego, the cup of the ego, is actually quite large, and it can hold some liquid. Now, most people are thirsting to death because they don't have any, they're just caught, being thrown by the sea, the waves in the sea of Maya. And so anyone who wants to help another person, even if it comes from an egoic level, is helpful. And so we should not denigrate the thought that people are wanting to help, and maybe they're a little proud, maybe they want to help because they think that people will look at them with adoration or that it will raise their status. Even that is helpful, but it's holding up only a little cupful of water, and that cupful is always limited. Now, if we get the ego out of the way as well as we possibly can, then we don't hold up a cup. We become like a faucet that is connected to an infinite source of water, and we can help many, many more people. And so moksha, the attempt for moksha, is the attempt to connect us to our divine source. And without being connected to that divine source, consciously connected, everyone is connected. Everyone is an extension of God. There's not a question of whether God is with us. In a way, the prayer, Lord, give me thyself, in a way, Master in other times talked about self-realization, because God has already given us himself or herself. The difficulty is that we have the sense of separation. The ego causes us to think that God has not yet come to us. And so the prayer, oh God, come to me, please come to me. It's a valid prayer, but not the highest prayer, because God has already come to us. But as long as we have the sense of separation, then it is a valid prayer, because we're still in duality, and it's better then to have the I-thou relationship to God, because it's more honest. And so the I-thou relationship to God is God, come to me, or Master, come to me, or light, come to me. In a deeper sense, as I say, that light or God is already within us. In a way, it is God who is praying to God to come to us, to come to him. But at that level it gets confusing. And so we have this I-thou relationship with God. For us, at the level at which we are, our job is to make that a very dynamic relationship, a very pure relationship. And that takes daily practice. It takes a sadhana of meditation. It takes sincerity of the heart in meditation. Don't worry as much. We get many, many questions that are basically along the line that when I sit to meditate, my mind is distracted. When I try to focus on the light, I see the light for a little while, but then my mind drifts away from that. That is a common difficulty for all meditators. Don't be too concerned about the fact that the mind becomes distracted. Arjuna had the same question of Master of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, and so it's an ancient question. Be more concerned that you're making a deep, sincere, and loving devotional effort, because it's that effort and that daily practice that will bring more powerfully to your own mind the realization that it is God that you are seeking, and it is with God that you are seeking God. So ultimately God does everything, but we're still caught at the level of consciousness that thinks that I, the ego, is the doer. And so, as long as we're caught there, let's be honest about that. Let's say we think that I am the doer, I am the meditator, I am the teacher, I am the giver. Let's be honest, because that's the state of mind that we're in. It isn't the ultimate reality. But what we should do in the midst of that is to keep daily trying to bathe ourselves in the realization of God's presence within, and to work toward the consciousness that God ultimately is the doer for all things. When Devi and I were with Swamiji here in Gurgaon, we basically asked him the question about becoming free, becoming self-realized, and how to do that sincerely. And he answered us by saying the whole of the spiritual path is meant to overcome the ego, or the sense of separation. He said that is done by deeper and longer meditation, and by seeing God as the doer in everything. And so those dual things, moksha, longer, deeper meditation, has to do with moksha, has to do with our realizing who and what we truly are, that we're aspects of God, and our seva ultimately then should be with the consciousness that it is not we who are doing it, but that it is God doing it through us, using us as a channel. And so we need to do that as sincerely and as purely as we can, and then leave the rest to God. So one is moksha, Lord, give me thyself, or Lord, help me achieve self-realization. And as I say, that takes deep, daily, sincere, disciplined effort to achieve that state. We could talk all night on just that theme alone, but I want to go on to the next part, how to be an inspiring teacher. You and I will never be an inspiring teacher, but we can be a channel for inspiration, because the ego will not inspire people, but using the pure desire of our desire to share, our desire to help others, then God can use us as a channel. We don't really teach anyone anything. What we can do, though, is be a reminder to them of the truth and knowledge that they carry within themselves. And so the way that this translates on a practical level is that when we're teaching, we should not be as concerned about the content of what we're teaching as we are about the people and their welfare. And so our first concentration should be trying to help people, trying to answer their questions, trying to make them feel supported, have them feel that we're there to be their friend, we're there to try to help share the knowledge that we have been given and that has been valuable to us, but that we're simply there to share with people what we have been given. When you prepare for a class, prepare so that you're prepared enough so that the content is not what's foremost in your mind. That what you're doing, the class, the concepts, the principles that you're thinking about, that's what you're thinking about, not, oh, I wonder what they're thinking of me, I wonder if I should stand a little straighter, have the concentration be on them and what you're trying to share. Swamiji always suggested that we pray and meditate before we give a class in an attempt to tune into the audience that we will be addressing. And so it is good, especially at the beginning, to try to have good preparation. In fact, Master himself told how to prepare for a class. He said, make an outline of the points that you want to make in the class, and then think about those points. Then tear up your outline and throw it away, and meditate on the points that you want to make, and then make another outline. And then, before you give the class, tear that outline away, up, and throw that outline, thank you, and throw that outline away, because some of the worst classes that I've seen are someone who comes for a 30-minute or 20-minute talk with 5 pages of notes and feels like they have to plow through every one of those notes. And so their consciousness isn't at all on who they're talking, it's on their notes and getting through all the points. So prepare ahead of time sufficiently so that what you're really trying to do is prepare sufficiently so that you can give the talk with a sense of confidence. Because if you're not confident, if you're concerned that you don't know the material, if you're shy, any of those things act as veils between you and the people that you're trying to give this offering to. And so prepare sufficiently so that you have the material under your belt. And then when you're giving the class, concentrate on the people and be able to make adjustments while you're giving the class according to the feedback that you're getting from the people. You can see by watching the people whether they're with you or whether they're not with you, whether they're understanding you or not understanding you. I'll tell you a story of the worst teaching experience I ever had. One time, after, this was in the late 1970s, and a fire had happened at Ananda village, and Swamiji was doing a nationwide tour that he called the Joy Tour, and he was speaking on the theme of how to have joy in your life. And he went to many, many cities in America, maybe 20 or 25 cities. At one point, toward the end of that, he had become ill, and this was in Denver, and he asked Davy and me to come. He had asked us to come, and then he became ill and wasn't able to give the talk. And so he asked me to give the talk in his place. And so I willingly agreed to do whatever I could to help. So I came and I began to address the audience, and it seemed fine. But then after about 5 minutes or so, no matter what I said, I could feel that there was like a barrier between me and the audience, and that barrier grew thicker and thicker. And I was trying to tell jokes, I was trying to tell stories, I was trying to do anything that I could to connect. And then finally we took a break, and I asked somebody, what in the world is going on here? And then it was revealed to me that the person who was at the registration desk, who was supposed to tell everyone that Swamiji was ill and that I was going to give the talk, was afraid to do that because she thought maybe people wouldn't come in. And so she hadn't told anyone. And so they were all expecting Swamiji to give the talk. And instead I was going on and on and on. And the barrier got thicker and thicker and thicker until finally it was revealed and then I came up and I apologized to everyone and said what was going on, and then it was fine. So part of the reason that I brought up this story was not just to say that you can feel the consciousness of an audience, but also I brought it up because there are certain things that can create barriers between you and the audience. And one of those things is the audience has certain expectations of sincerity and it's almost like there's a little bit of a contract between you and the people that you're teaching. If you're giving a class on Hong Sa, the audience comes expecting that you know Hong Sa and that you can teach Hong Sa. So there's a contract between you and the audience that, or the students, even though it's unspoken. And you cannot easily betray that contract without having negative ramifications. So let me just kind of finish here, because I don't want to talk about the negative aspects. I want to talk about the positive aspects of inspiration. So the positive aspects of inspiration are several. One is that you know enough of the content of what you're teaching to be able to teach it without a lot of hitch. And don't think that you have to study in order to know enough. You have to study so that you have self-confidence. So you have to know your content. You have to care deeply about the audience, the people, the students that you're teaching. And I know that this is true. When we talk with people and they say, oh, I was taking a class from, well, just recently, people were taking a class from Bhajan, how to be a yoga teacher, and they were just saying how loving, how supportive, and how helpful. And so, people, it really works when you care about people and when you work with them. So they'll know their sincerity. Try to be very, very much in tune with Master when you teach. When we teach, we should, I just wrote a blog on this, that when we teach, we should be very orthodox in our teachings, meaning that we should give very clearly what Master and what Swamiji have given, and not mix them with other teachings. For ourselves, we can try to find some inspiration, but with a little bit of other reading, but not very much until you're very, very deeply attuned to Master. Because otherwise, like mixing different flavors together that don't necessarily mix together. Each flavor can be fine in and of itself. It's the admixture. And so know exactly what Master said, what Swamiji said on the subject that you're teaching, and know it clearly. And when you're teaching the class, give only that. One time I wrote in this blog that one time I came to Swamiji, and it was with a new way to present Hong Sa that came to me in meditation. I had this great revelation of how to present Hong Sa. And I came and I told Swamiji my revelation, and he said simply, that isn't the way Master taught it. And what he was saying to me was, when we give our teachings to the public, we should do it the way that Master taught it, because that puts us in tune with the source of power and the source of inspiration, and that makes the offering that we give the hose rather than the cup. And so these are a few points. I want to leave time for Davy to talk, and then time for questions and answers.
Good evening, everyone, and we want to thank you all. First of all, thank you for coming tonight. But I think coming tonight represents a tiny little bit of the commitment you have made in your life to be a disciple, to serve our Guru. And we know that your lives are all very busy. And as I was sitting here meditating and trying to intuitively feel the group here. I could honestly feel how pleased God and Guru are with all of you for stepping out of your busy life and saying there is a higher purpose to life. And I want to give my life in service to that higher purpose. And even if it means I have less time for other personal things, I will do this. And I was thinking how Master came to the West in 1920 because you all weren't born yet. And so he had to come and share the teachings there and let a whole new generation come up in India that had a new vision that was not entirely rooted in the past traditions and yet rooted in a deep inspiration. And so for each of you, I can't tell you how grateful I am just as a person, and then how grateful I am as a Guru Bhai, as a brother, as a sister disciple to all of you for what you are doing, and also to our wonderful acharyas who are training you in being teachers in meditation, all the different levels and yoga postures. I think Swamiji said, even at the very beginning of Ananda, when it was so small and we were so unformed and so few people knew of us, Swamiji said, I think what's going on at Ananda with the dissemination of Master's teachings is one of the most important things happening in the world today. And now, some 45 years later, I can begin to see the truth of what he spoke. And now, as our work grows with all of you taking the training and being willing to be instruments, this work is just, that his statement is even more import, because the world so much needs Master's teachings now. And of course it's not easy for any of us to, I know this was true of Swami, and I know it's certainly true of Jyotisha and myself. If I never did another public talk again, I would be perfectly happy. But I know that my life was trained for something else, and so I willingly do it. I don't do it because I need to stand up in front of a microphone or even want to stand up in front of a microphone, but because I know that Master has found a place in my heart and he needs that to be expressed by sincere, willing, devoted disciples. And this is true of each of us in this room. So I join hands with you in this great effort we are starting now in India to really bring more and more people to these teachings. Jyotish spoke, I think, very fully on how to be attuned, at least in a brief talk. I would like to share a little bit with you. Maybe this will give you confidence as you teach about how to go about preparing a talk. Because as Jyotish described Master's instructions of making an outline, meditate on it, developing the points. And then Master also said, try to include illustrative stories, because that helps it drive the points home. So examples of things, stories from Master's life or Swami's life, in both autobiography and in Swami's autobiography, The New Path. There are so many examples. Conversations with Yogananda, so many examples of stories from our line of how these teachings come into practical application. So try to familiarize yourself with examples. Master also said to include a joke or two, because people like to laugh. When they laugh, they relax. And he said, and I've seen Swami do this often over the years, he'll give a light story, tell a joke, and people are laughing. And then he'll make a very important point, because people are relaxed then, and their consciousness is open. So don't think that sharing Master's teachings has to be very serious, and very somber, and very spiritual with a capital S. Swami was the most natural and relaxed teacher. He said, I don't teach with people, I just share with them. I share with my friends. And this is such an important attitude. We're just sharing with our friends. And if someone asks you a question that you don't know the answer to because it hasn't been in your realm of experience spiritually or in your daily life, you can simply say, I don't know the answer to that. I will try to find out and get back to you. So don't think you have to be anything more than you are. Don't think that you had to have any more depth of meditation than you have at this particular moment. Not to say you don't want to keep developing, but sincerity is the most powerful medium through which to communicate spiritual teachings, because God Himself is absolute truth and reality. And if we try to present ourselves in a way that isn't sincere, people sense that immediately. That's one of the reasons we so enjoy sharing with all of you, with the devotees in India, because there is an intuitive perception. Maybe you don't realize, but it's quite different in the rest of the world. There's an intuitive perception of spiritual truths. And it's almost as though we just have to ride a wave of receptivity with all of our Guru Bhais in India. We don't have to work so hard at explaining it and making it clear and logical and everything we need to do more in America. So be yourself, be natural, and then be creative. Jyotish said how Swami corrected him and said that's not how Master taught it. But every time you give a class on Hangsa, for example, or you give a meditation level 1, don't just have notes and you read your notes and you give that same class. Every time, make it fresh for you. To be an inspiring teacher, you need to be inspired by what you're saying. And I have heard Swami give, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 talks on the Hangsa technique. No two were ever the same. He brought up different points, he approached it differently, he made it engaging both for a new person and someone who had heard it many, many times. So put your creative thought and energy and think, how can I present this in a way I've never spoken of it before? And then it becomes fun for you. And I remember Jyotish saying that when he was in college, he took a course on the psychology of advertising. But the professor was so dated that he brought out these notes and the paper was yellowing and the edges were crumbling off. He'd obviously been giving the same lecture for many years. And this was in the late 1960s, I suppose. And when television had been around for 20 years, but his notes didn't go past radio. So that's when he stopped with the psychology of advertising. So we don't want to teach that way. We want to make it fresh. And don't be afraid to do it that way. I know when I'm preparing a talk, I'm often surprised at the approach that comes. I'll have the ideas, and then all of a sudden, if I'm meditating before, it was like a thought will be introduced that I really didn't intend to develop the class in that way. But I think, okay, God and Guru, if that's how you want to teach the class, let me develop it. And then it becomes cooperative with God. You reach out for His thoughts, and then you see how they want to flow through you. So teaching, or again, sharing, can be such a beautiful experience. And sometimes I hear people say, oh, I'm so frightened, I'm so frightened. What's the worst that can happen? You know, you forget what to say, you kind of stumble. It's not the worst thing in the world. Swamiji said once, I finally realized people get nervous because they're afraid to appear stupid or foolish. And if you start with the supposition that you are stupid and foolish, what's the big mystery? You just go from there. And so just let it flow through you. And the more experience you have, the more this can happen. And the more you want to help others. You know, I don't want to embarrass someone sitting here, but I want to encourage people to teach. Last year when we were visiting India, now we don't visit, we live here, as Jyotish said, but we were giving a Kriya initiation in Pune retreat, and Devendra was translating for us because there were students that he had brought up through his classes in Pune City. Devendra's one of the monks, if you don't know him. And I couldn't understand his translation because it was in Tamil, but I could tell by how he was sharing with them that he was a wonderful teacher, because I could feel he so much wanted them to understand. And if they didn't understand, he would go deeper into it until they were satisfied and he felt he had done his best job. And I hope I'm not embarrassing you, but I could tell the sincere desire to help those new Kriya yogis understand the technique. I could feel it flowing through him, even though I didn't understand his words at all. And so I was so impressed, and I knew he would be, and is, a very fine teacher, because I could feel his main motivation was to really help others, not about himself at all. So these are just some simple thoughts, and I will just close. Swami talks about the different stages that he goes through in his writing, when he's writing and editing a book. And I find this helpful when I'm creating a concept of a class and teaching. First he says he gets his thoughts clear. He'll write them down so he knows where he's going with them. Gets the main thoughts, and then he looks and says, is that exactly what I want to say? Is that as clear as I can present it? Then he'll go through a third time, and he'll try to make it magnetic and inspiring and add richness to it, and layers and stories and jokes and nuances. And then finally, he makes it beautiful in his writing. He'll add beautiful rhythm and poetic imagery. And so these are helpful to do when you're teaching too and preparing. Get your concepts clear. Make sure that the ideas you're expressing can be well communicated to the students, not confusing or muddled. Then make them magnetic and inspiring by enriching them, and then make it beautiful and poetic. So, and I think if we can do this, we will all, each of us in our own ways, can be a little Guruji, a little spark of Master going out to help all those students who come, all the sincere truth seekers who come. And finally, we're very fortunate in sharing the teachings the way Master brought them, because they don't attract the multitudes. They don't, by and large, attract curiosity seekers. Master's path attracts people who really want to find God, and those are the people that it's really a blessing and a joy to share with. So we're so happy to be a part of this great Sangha in guiding Guru and this great work that Master is starting in India.